Hi, and welcome to another edition of NCBA's Coffee Break. And today we are really honored to have two of TransUnion's leaders with us, Jenna and Wendy. And I'm going to ask them each to give us their background and where they're from, and then we can get into some of the meat of our questions that we have today. So, Jenna, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jenna Munoz. I've spent most of my career in third-party collections. Prior to being at TransUnion, I've spent nearly all of my career at Midland Credit Management on Core Capital Group. I had a very short hiatus and went to go work for HID Global, the guys that make the card readers. And then I came back. I held a variety of roles there, from being in the legal kind of file clerk, which is where I started. A lot of people don't know. I kind of started from the ground up in this industry and built my career. So did that, project management, vendor management, touched a lot of different functions within that group, prior to making my way over to what was formerly called New Star in the product management role. I'm still in that product management role today, but since the TransUnion acquisition, our team name has changed a few times, but primarily responsible for creating products that help our clients, specifically members of NCBA, communicate with their customers.
Wow, that's really great that you've seen it from the beginning till now. So you've been in every
Yep.
part. And Wendy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Nice to meet you all. I'm Wendy Weinhardt. I am a solution consultant here at TransUnion. I've been here for about 3 years, predominantly working in the contact center and collections solutions. Prior to joining TransUnion, I had been over at Capital One for about 23 years in a number of different roles, from customer acquisitions, digital messaging, so think email, texting, things of that nature, and then spent about 5 years in the debt collection space, working in both first and third party debt collection, so standing up their digital processes. So really appreciate you having me here today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, between the two of you, there's quite a bit of experience about the industry in general and about debt collection in particular. So, we're here to talk about some of the products TransUnion has and some of the exciting new things that are going on. I think it's pretty much agreed that consumer communication is key to resolving outstanding debt. So what trends are you seeing in the industry in general, and what are creditors' rights law firms doing, and how can people maximize communications in our space?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've noticed, and I think most people in the industry have noticed with the last few years, so the kind of influx in COVID, agents working from home, right? So being forced to communicate with your customers in a new way and a much more efficient manner, which is always the top of mind, right? We always want to reduce our cost to collect, but being forced in an environment that made you think about things differently. And then with Reg F and that being formalized, I think it really opened up the possibility to communicate with our customers in a new way, or a different way than what we had been before, with your traditional methods, right? Phone calls, paper letters. I'm going to bombard you with a million phone calls. I'm going to bombard you with a million letters until eventually, hopefully, somebody answers or it just goes stale, right? So I think those two things were really big rocks in the industry, which sort of catapulted kind of this more digital evolution. A lot of what you'll hear us talk about today is how that plays into the utilization of email. And a lot of things that we've seen, and I've seen in other webinars and content, whether that be first-party servicers, third-party servicers, debt buyers, what have you, is they're really looking and evaluating who they are placing accounts with based on how wide of a net they cast in terms of how they're communicating with consumers, right? Are they just using those traditional means of collections where it's phone call and letter, or have they opened that up to allow customers to communicate with them in the way they want to communicate, right? So opening that up, whether that be utilizing text message or utilizing email. I think oftentimes what we've seen over the last handful of years is a natural degradation in those right party contact rates, which kind of aligns with, I think, a demographic shift in consumers that you see in your portfolios today. And I think when, at least that I've talked to clients, if you aren't utilizing other means of collections, email specifically, you might be in a position where you could lose a client, right? You are kind of pigeonholing yourself to maximizing your right party contact rates and your payment rates and your liquidation rates by only 2 channels, right? The reality is consumers don't always want to talk to us on the phone. So utilizing a method like email is a great way to contact somebody, where if I get an email from somebody saying, hey, Jenna, your account's in place with ABC collection firm, I can take action on that when I want to, not necessarily on a phone call. And I think that's something that's really key is one, what I talked about was one, buyers and servicers are looking to place accounts with those that are casting a wider net. I think the expectation is you have more channels to reach out to, and 2, really aligning with consumer behavior and pattern, which we don't always talk about it in that method or in that form. So I think those are the 2 drivers in terms of what I'm seeing as trends in the industry and why there's this more kind of digital communication shift.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I know myself, do I look at snail mail anymore? Do I, if I don't know who's calling me, do I answer the phone? So consumers, we're the same way. And, while it seems that many creditors expect email communications to be incorporated in their law firm's strategy, the folks they hire to collect the debt, what are some of the primary issues and challenges that law firms need to take into consideration when, taking that leap and building out an effective email campaign?
I think before we get to that really quickly, one of the things that I think you and I talked about, Nathan, while prepping is how many firms are utilizing email versus how many are expected to. And I don't think we have an answer for how many buyers and services expect their firms to be utilizing email or other forms of communication. But from what we hear, my understanding is maybe half are using it, when I think that number should be much closer to 80, 90, if not 100%.
No, that's good to know. That means 50% of the market isn't taking advantage of a tool that will just make their life easier.
Exactly.
Yeah. So back to the other question, what should law firms think about? What are the primary issues and challenges they need to worry about when they're setting up these types of campaigns?
Yeah, Nathan, I think I've thought about this a lot over the years, and it's really kind of interesting. So stepping back a little bit to a time when everything was paper letter and snail mail, phone calls, that sort of thing, and we really are in a space now where consumers want things that are different. And so it kind of goes back to that old product marketing adage of, right product, right place, right time. But now you're thinking about it from an email perspective. Do I have the right customer with the right email address? I mean, I personally have over 5 email addresses. Which one of those am I going to check? Which one is the best one for me? That sort of thing. It's not just all about verification. It's also about, which one am I more likely to engage on? So right customer, right email address, making sure your content is trustworthy and compelling. The last thing anybody wants is to get something in their email that they think is suspicious and scammy, right? They're not going to engage with that. And then, of course, also thinking about it from the perspective of, what's the right cadence and the right timing of things. I know recently I signed up, I was telling Jenna this the other day, I signed up for marketing coupons with a company that I use all the time for clothing. And I started getting text messages daily, emails daily. And that was just way too much, way too much communication. So trying to figure out, what's the right cadence for sending these communications to the point where somebody's not going to forget about you, but they're also going to, engage and not want to, to discontinue your services. So, you take all of those things into consideration. And I think there's kind of 4 main pillars that the law firms really need to think about. The first one is verification. Is this email verified to the individual that they're looking for or not? We did a recent survey and found that 17% of people had changed their email address with their financial institution in the last 12 months. And to me, that number was just staggering. I never would have thought it was that high. And then a secondary statistic to that was 23% of people had abandoned an email address in the last year. And so you start to think about, where did your email address that you have on your portfolio come from? Did it come from the creditor? If so, where did they get that email from? And when was the last time they tried to communicate with their customer on that email address? And you really start to have to think about, is the data that I have in my repository that I'm reaching out to folks on, is this really the right email address for them? So assuming that it's verified, obviously, then you have a higher chance of somebody engaging with you. If it's not verified, there's obviously all sorts of compliance risks, those sorts of things that can go wrong. But aside from that, the wrong person just isn't going to pay you. So
It's
there's
true.
that, right? So that's kind of the first thing that I think folks need to focus on. The second one, though, is deliverability. So is this email address likely to make it into the consumer's inbox when I send an email? And there's a number of different things that can go into that that's not just associated with the email address itself. Some of them are, right? Like, does this email exist? But others are things that the senders are doing. So there's this notion of there's an IP, every IP address that sends out email has an IP address and it has a reputation score associated with it. And all of your internet service providers have algorithms to try to see whether or not this sender is a bad actor. Like, you and I don't want spam in our inboxes, right? We don't want an email from our, long lost 15th cousin, asking for money for the lottery winnings that they're going to send our way, right? Like, there's all these things we don't want. So it's good that the ISPs have algorithms to keep out those bad actors, but unfortunately, legitimate companies also kind of get tripped up in those as well. And so that's the other thing that you really need to look for is, are the email addresses you're sending to, are they valid, legitimate emails? Are they likely to get delivered? Are you hitting too many spam traps that are then going to have a negative IP reputation that just prevents further emails from being delivered? So there's a whole host of things that can go wrong there. For the sake of brevity, I won't go into all of them, but that's the second thing that folks need to think about after verification is, thinking about deliverability. And then that last piece is engagement. How likely is a consumer to engage with this particular email address? If I've got 5 email addresses, you want to find the one that I'm using and the one that I'm more likely to open, not the one that I'm, set off on the shelf and send all my junk mail to. So there's a number of different things they need to think about. And of course, content and all of those things matter as well. But put yourself in the consumer shoes and think like a consumer when you're setting up your email program. And that's ultimately that's going to work best for you. So I know I said a lot there.
No, it's fascinating. And just before we move on to another question, the IP reputation risk, maybe you can explain, from what I'm hearing, is if it's not done properly, they could block all your emails. Basically, your information won't get to anybody, let alone the right consumer. So maybe just touch on, just for our listeners to understand what we're talking about, because I don't think everyone understands how emails work.
Sure. Yeah. So if you think about email similar to you would a phone channel, I think we're all probably familiar with getting, you get a phone call from somebody that you don't recognize and it says fraud or potential spam or all these things on your phone. Well, all of that sort of thing also happens in the email space, but a lot of it kind of happens behind the scenes. And so the internet service providers are going to put your emails into those spam folders. They might put them in the inbox. They might even reject them altogether. So there's a number of different things that can impact your IP reputation score. Simple things like I'm sending too many emails at once. So if yesterday I sent 0 emails and today I send 1 million emails, that's a very bad actor behavior. And so that can damage my IP reputation. So you want to slowly kind of gradually build up your email program. Other things that can impact you are things like hard bounces. So if you send a lot of emails that to email addresses that don't exist, then the ISPs can presume that you are either A, not having a bad hygiene practices and you're not cleaning up your repository, or B, you're a bad actor who's just kind of creating these email addresses. So those are things that can impact you. And honestly, that's something that you have some control over yourself. If you send out an email and it bounces, remove that from future campaigns. So that's automatically going to improve your next campaign. And then of course, using services that TransUnion offers, of course, can help clean that up as well before you send them.
No, it makes sense that you need some people that are experts in this. It's not just go ahead and push send. So
exactly, there's a lot to it. Yeah.
Thanks. So that's really great information, and obviously we could go on for a long time on that topic. So, but thanks for bringing us that to our listeners. So, what can firms who establish effective electronic communications campaigns expect in the long term?
I think ultimately is you're empowering consumers to take control of past due debt, right? I think that's the first thing Wendy talked about, is putting yourself in the consumer's shoes. I think that's one thing that's limited people in this industry from enabling email communications to their customers is I'm afraid to email because I don't know what harassing behavior might be. So what I think it really empowers long-term is it allows consumers to take control of the situation that they feel like is out of control. What does that mean for the KPIs that we're all monitoring? I would imagine that, you know, it's going to broaden and improve your right party contact rate. It's going to improve your payment rates. It's going to improve your website traffic. So if you have a web portal that consumers can log on to pay, or there's some type of calculator on that portal where they can kind of play around with different metrics to create a payment plan that works for them, you're going to see a lot more traffic going to those sites than you normally would have, right? If you don't have that trigger to say, oh, I'm going to send an email to Jenna. Jenna's going to see my company name. It's going to trigger, oh, yep, I've seen a communication from them before. Maybe I haven't. Let me find out what this is about, right? So it's going to trigger a different set of consumer patterns that will ultimately improve those KPIs and metrics that we all care about, right? Your right party contacts, your payment rate. I would imagine, and I don't know this to be true, but my assumption is that I wonder how it's going to impact broken payers, right? That's kind of a problem in a lot of different firms today, which is, hey, I'm going to sign up for a payment plan. It might be like a 10, 15-year plan. There's a high chance in that 10, 15 years that somebody's going to be a broken payer. So what I would imagine to happen is a decrease in those rates, right? I would expect to see that if you're empowering consumers to take control of things they wouldn't ordinarily do. Now, that is just my pure assumption, has not been, totally validated, but that's what I would expect to see long term.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that offering the consumer the ability to participate in their own resolution of the debt is really key. And I really think that does make a significant impact. So we only have a couple minutes left, maybe no minutes left, but anyway, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from our coffee break conversation today? Who wants to start?
Wendy, you can go ahead.
Okay, sure. So I think probably the biggest thing I want folks to take away is email is a very challenging channel, but don't be afraid of it, right? It might be more difficult to get an email delivered than it is that paper letter to a mailbox, but it's really the channel that you need to be moving into if you aren't already there. And then, thinking about doing it in a sound way, using verification services, deliverability, engagement, and thinking like a customer, making sure that your program is solid and from the foundation of it and building on it from there. So I think that's the ultimate takeaway.
Yeah. And Jenna?
I have nothing to add on that. She kind of touched on all the points that I would have left everyone with, which is, don't be afraid to start email if you haven't. If you don't have the capability to hire experts in the email space, work with consultants if you are kind of hesitant to make those moves, but also make sure that you're developing, compliant policies and procedures to track and monitor everything that you're doing with email. That's another benefit to it too, which is everything is trackable.
Yeah, so this was great information, and I'm sure folks are going to have a lot of questions about this kind of topic because it's new to many in this space. So I hope that both of you will agree to come back another time and talk a little more. So
Yep.
Yeah, so with that, I'm going to let you get back to your day, and thank you so much for joining another edition of NCBA's Coffee Break. So thank you for everything you do and everything that TransUnion does for the industry. Have a great day.